is a workshop about Scaffold ETH. I'm also a core member of the Build Guild. Who here has heard of the Build Guild? A few people, yeah. I see some familiar faces here. Great to see you. Welcome to ETHGlobal Istanbul. It's great to kick this off with some full stack Dapps talk. So Scaffold ETH, anyone who doesn't know Scaffold ETH is an open source toolkit really designed at making the onboarding experience to build a Dapps really easy. It was originally created by Austin Griffith, who is one of the founders of the Build Guild, and the concept is basically rapidly prototyping, being able to build a Dapps quickly and efficiently. So if you go to scaffoldeth.io, I know that's hard to read, sorry about that, but if you go to scaffoldeth.io, you'll get a couple options on how you can install it. So you can install it with Git by just checking out, cloning the repository, or you could fork it and build in your own repository, or you can run npx create ETH. That's the kind of in beta, but it's pretty stable. And the npx just is a little bit more intuitive in the sense that it gives you this kind of choose your adventure type experience. So we're going to use that, and we're going to go in here, and we're going to start hacking away. So we're going to do npx create ETH at latest, right? And basically that's going to ask you hey, do you want to install the newest version of create ETH? You want to click yes. Obviously, I already have that done, so it didn't prompt me for that. But then you can just name your project. So you can just say, we'll say Istanbul. And then it's going to ask you what chain you want to use. So if you're familiar with Hardhat, you can choose Hardhat. If you want to write your tests in Solidity, then you probably want to use Foundry. It's really just up to you. I personally still like Hardhat, so I'm just going to go ahead and say Hardhat. And then it's going to ask you if you want to install the packages. So this is going to download Scaffold ETH automatically, kind of bootstrap the environment, install all the dependencies with Yarn, and then also initialize a Git repository, so then you could just check it in your own Git configuration. This takes probably about a minute, depending on the internet connection. Hopefully there's not a bunch of hackers right now downloading packages, and we can get started here quickly. But yeah, so this is, it's going to install everything you need to get started. Let's go ahead and give that just a second. While that's installing, the other option, like I said before, is you can just go to Git. You can clone the repository. I'll talk really briefly about the requirements. You need Node.js installed on your computer, obviously, and you need a Yarn package manager. Make sure you're using a newer version of Yarn and not the old one. If you're running Linux, sometimes there's some old version of Yarn that gives issues, so just update it. And then obviously you need Git. And all the instructions that I'm going to go through are in the GitHub repo. And I also did a really good workshop that you might want to check out that kind of shows how you can do a graph integration as well. And this is available at bit.ly/fullstackdapp. And it kind of walks a little more in depth on how you do some of the full stack stuff. Because of time today, we're going to try to get as far as we can, but we'll go from there. So it is still installing. So I knew that might be a problem, so I actually went ahead. Oh, there it goes. Sweet. All right, so it scaffolded everything for me, and then it just tells me, okay, what do I need to do next? Well, I need to go into the Istanbul directory, and then I need to run my chain. So everything it's a Yarn mono repo, so it's designed with this concept of just yarn this, yarn that, and there's all these scripts that are already written for you to do things easily. So I'm using tmux, which basically allows me to kind of split my screen up. If you aren't using tmux, you can just do this in separate windows. So if you see me kind of breaking stuff up, that's why. But Yarn chain is going to do that. It's going to spin up your chain. So it's going to spin up Foundry or Hardhat, depending on which one you chose. And then it's going to spin up obviously the accounts that you can start testing with. And all of the associate private keys are there, so you could copy and paste those into MetaMask if you want to do or something. But then in the second window, we're going to do Yarn start. Okay? So Yarn start is going to spin up the front end, which is basically React with Next.js. All the code is pretty much written in TypeScript, but you can also write JavaScript as well. TypeScript's a little bit better in my opinion, but it is up to you. So that's it. So now the front end's up. And then in this next window, same thing, we're going to go into the Istanbul directory and do Yarn deploy. So Yarn start, Yarn chain, Yarn deploy. That's kind of the pattern. And we can see here that we basically got the contract deployed, and we see some output on console log, which is from Hardhat. and we see that our front end recompiled, and we see that we get a contract address, and it told us how much gas we used. So there's a lot of cool output that we get, how many Solidity files were compiled, and then our contract's been deployed. So let's take a look real quickly, briefly at the code and show this. So it's a monorepo, so there's two packages. There's Hardhat and Next.js. The Hardhat directory is going to have the contract in there in the contracts folder. And so we can come in here and see it's a very basic contract that comes with Scaffold ETH. It's basically this kind of greeter. We call it a greeter, or like a hello world contract that keeps track of a greeting, right? There's some other stuff here. I'm not going to get too much into that. But for the most part, it's a very basic greeter contract. It also has a modifier. It also has a function to update the greeting. So you can pass in a new greeting, and then you can also make it's payable, so you can send some funds. But it's got this stuff in here. So let's take a look at Scaffold ETH real quick. So let's load up Scaffold ETH on port 3000. This is Scaffold ETH. So the first thing you'll notice is that you get this kind of like hello world page. It's like the index.tsx file. This is kind of where you're going to want to build your app out when you start hacking away. And you can kind of think of it like as the home page, and it's like going to be your DApp inside of Scaffold ETH. And that way you can keep the header, you can keep the footer, and then you just build around it inside of this index.tsx file. And we'll get to that in a second, but I want to talk about this debug contracts tab. This is kind of like the sweet sauce of Scaffold ETH, and it's what's really cool is every time that you do a yarn deploy, you generate an ABI, right? So what Scaffold ETH is doing is just reading in the new ABI every time you make a change to your smart contract, and then automatically building a UI for you. So this is really useful because you don't have to start, writing React code. I don't know, here's a React developer? Few. Most people are like, oh, I don't want to touch React unless I absolutely have to. You want to experiment on your smart contract. That's the fun stuff. And so this is cool because it just creates these things for you. So we already know without looking at this contract that there's a counter. We also know that there's a write function that allows us to change the greeting, and it accepts value. And then there's a withdraw function. And we see all of the variables here as well. And then up here in the top, you'll see there's this connect wallet option, but there's a burner wallet option. So the burner wallet is cool because, like, let's say I want to change the greeting to Istanbul, like this, and I hit send. It's going to tell me I don't have funds to pay for that transaction. I can just grab some funds inside of the burner wallet. I don't even need to connect MetaMask, which is really useful because MetaMask can give you these like nonce errors when you're deploying locally. So yeah, you got everything you need here, and then you can do the transaction. And then there you go. We updated the state of that greeting. So, and then you get a receipt, right? So you can see like basically what happened with the transaction. You can see like if there was any issues or something like that. And then we also have this withdraw function. So if I was to send some value in here, we could say like 0.05 ETH. Now you'd think you could just hit send. That's going to tell me, well, it's a big int, right? If you've done some Solidity stuff, you might know that you need to transact in Way. So there's this cool button here that will do the math for you. So it will multiply what you want in ETH times 10 to the 18th power, and then you can just transact in Way, right? So it's a really cool little developer experience, and then we hit send, and then it was successful. And then we can see here that our contract has a balance as well. So we're getting the contract balance as well. So everything's really intuitive and fluid and easy to do. And then you would also see this withdraw function. So let's try to hit that. It's going to tell me I'm not the owner of the contract. So who's the owner of the contract? Does anyone want to tell me what this address is?
It's
Yes. In the front. Round of applause. So that's the hard hat account. So the reason why that's important is if you first start messing with Scaffold ETH, you'll be like, who owns the contract? Well, there's a deploy script right below the contracts folder. And here, we basically get a list of all the named accounts right here. And then we do the deploy, and we pass in an argument as the deployer. So because if we look back at our smart contract, there is a ownable kind of, well, not ownable, but there's an access control pattern in here. It's kind of hard-coded. You probably want to use ownable here from OpenZeppelin, but we've kind of like hard-coded one in where we actually pass in the owner of the contract here. We have our own little modifier here, And we're basically checking for that on the withdraw function. So if we go right here, it says, well, you have to be the owner, right, of the contract. So the reason I'm saying that is you can come in here and you can grab your burner wallet. So we can copy the address, and then we can just paste that in here, save it. Now we can redeploy. So now if you want to redeploy, you can do yarn deploy again. If you haven't made a change to your smart contract, you'll notice that it doesn't compile. And that's because like it just detects that. If you want to force a new contract, you can do -- reset, and it will always force a new contract. And so that's really useful if you just want to like reset everything and kind of guarantee that you get a deploy. You'll notice that you continue to kind of keep getting a new contract. So now if you look at the owner, it matches the burner wallet, right? So we have this thing. So if you're about to launch to a testnet, you probably don't want hard hat to have access to the contract. You probably want to have your own deployer account, which we're going to get to in a second. But now we were able to do that. So now if I actually do some value, so first of all, I want to bring up a new incognito window. And if I'm going too fast for people, this has been recorded many times. And it also is live streamed, so you guys can go back and watch it. Or I'll be here to answer any questions you guys have. But if you notice, in a new incognito window, I get a new burner wallet. So I can come in here, grab some ETH, change the greeting to, yo, what's up, like this, send some value. I could send 0.05 ETH, send. And if I try to withdraw here, it's going to say I'm not the owner. But if I come over to this one, now I can like refresh, come to the bottom, I see there's a balance, and I can withdraw it. And it was successful. So you can kind of start messing around. You see how we start tinkering around. And yeah, so the next thing I want to talk about is if you want to take your contract from here and then you want to like push it to a testnet, because like local stuff is great, but at some point you're probably going to want to collaborate with your team. You don't want to use the hard hat accounts to do that because those are shared hard hat accounts. Everyone has the same private keys. And so the minute you try to fund one of those accounts to do your deploy, it's going to fail because someone's going to withdraw all the funds from that deployer account. So there's a function in here where you can do yarn run generate, or I think just yarn generate works too. But what it's going to do is it's going to generate a private key for you, a deployer account in the environment file locally. And then it's going to give you a public address. So then you can basically take that and you can fund it. So let's say we want to deploy to Sepolia right now, right? So we can do yarn account. And we can kind of see what's going to pop up here. It's going to bring up a QR code for us, so we could like scan it on our phone if we had some testnet funds on our phone. And then it's going to give us a public address, and it's also going to go out and check balances for all the accounts. Okay? So we could take this address now, because this is the account that I just generated. I could come over here to MetaMask if I have some funds in my MetaMask, which I have a lot. So I'll send some Sepolia ETH. I'll send 0.05, sure. Okay, next. Confirm. So Beba, I was able to send this from my MetaMask to my deployer account. And if we just give that a second and then do another yarn account, and then we can see, I hope that was on Sepolia. Was it? It was mainnet. No. Yeah, it was. Let me just make sure. Yes. Okay, so there it is. So the balance has been updated. So we see here that we get a balance, right? 0.05. So now what we can do is do yarn deploy -- network Sepolia. So that's going to take our contract. It's going to see that there's nothing to compile, but it's going to deploy it to Sepolia for us using that deployer account that we generated. So really seamless experience to start writing a contract, deploy it to the testnet, and obviously that's going to be a lot slower than hard hat, so we might have to wait just a second here, but we will give that a sec. There it goes. So now it deployed. So we've deployed our contract, so we have the address here, right here, so we can look it up on Sepolia Etherscan. And we can paste it in and see if it deployed, right? And now the contract is deployed. It was deployed 19 seconds ago. But if you look right here, it's also already verified. But chances are your contract is not going to be verified because you probably have made some changes. I didn't do any changes to my contract. But if it wasn't, there is a yarn verify -- network Sepolia. And it will take the contract, compile it, and then compare the bytecode with Etherscan to verify it, basically to make it trustworthy, and then it's going to give you that green checkbox. So the reason why that's important is if you're going to go for the graph bounty, you probably want to create a subgraph for your contract, and you want to have the ABI on and available in Etherscan. And so that is a real simple command to do that, and then you'll be ready to do the graph bounty. So you guys can get 2 things for 1. Okay, so yeah, so that's already verified. The next thing we want to look at is like how we update our front end a little bit. So I only have like 5 minutes, so this is like speed run Scaffold ETH. So we look in the Next.js folder. I'm going to briefly touch on it, but there's a couple config files. The first one is the scaffold config. So if you come here, there's a chains.hardhat, so we can change that to Sepolia and then save it. And then if we come back to Scaffold ETH and refresh, we'll get kicked out of our burner wallet here, but then we can connect MetaMask. So we can say MetaMask, now we're on MetaMask, and I have my contract on Sepolia right here. The network's been updated. So now I'm ready to interact with my contract on Sepolia, right? So I could set a greeting to ETH Istanbul like this, hit send. It's going to ask me to pay some gas. This is going to be an actual transaction that I'll have to sign. So we were able to update our front end, deploy a contract, do that kind of stuff. And then we could also deploy, if we wanted to take this and share it with our teammates, we could do a yarn Vercel. That's going to basically package up the entire front end for us. Set up and deploy, yes. Which one do I? If you haven't logged into Vercel, it's going to ask you to log in or create an account here. It asks you if you want to link it to an existing project, what you want to name the project, where the source code is. It's going to set it up and then upload it for us. So it's going to actually deploy your front end and then go from there. So really seamless experience to then take your app and put it on a public web server that you can then share with your team and start doing some more collaboration. So it's building. This might take a second, so I'm not going to stick on this. But just so you know, at the end of this, it's going to give us a URL that we can access our DApp, and any of you guys could have been able to go there. I want to touch on a couple other things real quick because this is really important. So inside of the pages directory, there's an app TSX directory. This is kind of like the main app file for Scaffold ETH. But if you look into the, see here, index TSX file, this is probably where you want to start building your app. Scaffold ETH uses WAGMI, and it also uses RainbowKit, and it uses TypeScript Next.js. And it has a bunch of hooks and components available already. So first of all, you can use WAGMI to get the account information or to get balances or whatever you want to do. All of the WAGMI hooks are listed on the docs for WAGMI, and they're available here inside of Scaffold ETH. So if you want to start doing front-end stuff, you can reference that. And then if you go to docs.scaffoldeth.io, there's a section that talks about all the components. So like there's an address component, so you can get this kind of like pretty little ENS resolution with the copy button. There's also a balance, so you can get like a pretty balance that you can convert from ETH to US dollars just by clicking. There's an address input that does ENS resolution, right? So you can type in an ENS name and it will resolve it for you. So there's a lot of these components built in. And then there's also Scaffold ETH hooks. So if you go here to Scaffold ETH hooks, there's a hook that allows you to read from your smart contract. There's a hook that allows you to write to your smart contract. Like here you can pass in some arguments. Like maybe you want to set the greeting and then you need to set the value as an argument. So everything's written for you to make it easy to actually start writing your front end. And it's pretty seamless to do. Normally at this point I would start kind of showing you guys how to write some front end stuff, but I think the docs is really good. And I think there's lots of examples there. You guys won't need that. So I have 1 minute for questions. So anyone have a question? Yeah. Yeah, I can. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Can you speak up? Can you, display the transaction receipts in the UI? Yeah, you should. It comes back as an object. I don't know if there's a hook for that. I mean, I know you can like look at events. Oh, like the actual like drop down thing?
The pull down like.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that is. I'd have to look, but let's connect up offline and I'll look it up for you.
Yeah, the other question is, can you deploy the contract in a multiple chain with the same address from the
I'm sorry, can you speak up? I can't hear you. It's really hard.
Can you Can
Yeah.
you deploy the contract into the multiple chain with the same address from Scaffold?
Multiple chains, no, we don't have any support for that. It would be single chain. So you could, I guess technically you could keep deploying to multiple chains and keep updating them, or like just use different commands, but the UI can only point to one chain. You'd have to create a fork of Scaffold ETH and build something cool like that, but that would be awesome. So yeah.